This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, we now bring you an exclusive interview with Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance, on G20 agenda on energy security and collective action. The interviewer is Nirbhay Singh, journalist.
International Solar Alliance or ISA has been working on mission mode to promote solar power and help the world move towards net zero. It has been working with governments and financial institutions to make clean energy accessible to all. It has set an ambitious target to unlock $1 trillion investment in solar power by 2030. The International Solar Alliance is also working with G20 under India's presidency for reducing cost of technology and financing in solar power sector. ISA Director General Dr. Ajay Mathur is with us today to talk about the various initiatives the global body has taken and future plan of action. Welcome, sir, to Akashvani.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Solar power has been significantly contributing towards reducing carbon footprint. Where does India and the world stand in leveraging solar power today?
India is one of the very few countries in the world where we have seen a massive shift towards solar. Imagine that in the year 2012, we had probably 20 megawatts of solar. And in 2023, 10 years later, we have nearly 70,000 megawatts of solar with another 50,000 megawatts in construction. As far as the world is concerned, we have also seen a growth. But that growth has occurred in the OECD countries and China. In other words, in countries which are much richer than us. Overall, the global footprint of solar is now approximately 10% of the global electricity supply. It's about the same in India, slightly more. But what we have seen is the movement, at least in the richer countries and in a country like India also, towards solar, meeting particularly the grid demands because of large solar farms.
While solar is one of the main sources of green energy, a lot of electronic waste is generated by solar panels and other equipment used for generating solar power. So there is a dark side also of solar power.
There is absolutely no doubt that as the solar panels, and look at the future, as the batteries with it we use with these solar panels, as they end their life, they essentially become available as junk. And therefore what would happen in the normal case? They would go into the landfill. That's what we don't want. The challenge is therefore, how do we recycle them? How do we collect them? The electronic waste guidelines in India ask that these are collected through organizations under the extended warranty, the extended service warranty of which is provided by the electronic companies. So they will be collected. But then what do we do? Because if you look at it, 25 years from now, the solar technologies will be very different from the technologies we have today. Just as today's technologies are so different from the ones we had 25 years ago. So we don't know what material would be reused at that point of time. The only way of moving ahead with recycling is to ensure that everything is taken apart. Which means solar panels should be made so that they are completely dismantlable. This means that today's standards for the making of solar cells should be such that they are dismantlable. Then we will move. Unfortunately, we are not yet at the stage where we either have the standards or even the recycling technologies which would lead to the complete removal of all materials from solar panels. But I am glad that we are almost there. Another 3 or 4 years, you will start seeing these technologies coming to the market.
The PLI scheme is working well in solar sector, and there is a possibility of India soon emerging as a major exporter of PV cells. What is your projection?
It is very important for the solar manufacturing to be geographically dispersed. Today, one country alone contributes to about 70% of the solar production, and this leads to supply chain constraints. So on the ports of Shanghai in 2022, there were box loads, container loads of solar panels which were waiting for ships to take them away. And conversely, there were several months during which there were no solar panels available in all of Africa. This tells us that as we look to the future, we are looking to a 3 to 8 times increase in the demand for solar panels by 2030. 7 years, 3 to 8 times the demand. This means that the manufacturing will need to be dispersed. PLI is a great scheme because what it does is it not only says you need to manufacture, but it also says you need to manufacture to a level of efficiency that is the market efficiency. This therefore provides an incentive for the Indian producers to look not only at today's technologies but also at tomorrow's technologies. In my view, this is a fundamental push towards getting cleaner and cleaner panels into the market sooner rather than later.
To what extent India G20 presidency will help in bridging technological gap in solar power sector? Getting low-cost finance is another area the world needs to work on for faster capacity addition in renewable space.
First of all, let us be very clear about what G20 is not. The G20 is not a pledging platform for monies. So for them to agree that they would provide resources is, I think, it's better not to go down that route. However, what the G20 completely agrees with is the issue that we need to use solar energy to produce green hydrogen to decarbonize the vast amount of places where we can't electrify. So for example, if you are talking of steel or if you are talking of heat in process industry, those are places where green hydrogen could be used for. So that the G20 has pushed the creation of a global green hydrogen innovation center. G20 is also looking at how we can enhance the visibility of solar in your lives and mine, and therefore has recognized the 20 startups from Africa dealing with solar energy. This is good because what it tells us is that not only is supply important, but demand is important as well. And these people are closest to the demand. The other thing that I think is important for G20 is that this energy is used as efficiently as possible. And therefore the energy efficiency part is something that is at the center of the agenda. And last but not least, we are looking at ways in which solar can be used to both address issues of development, for example, providing electricity to people who never had it, universal access, as well as ensuring that it is carbon free. So solar fits in very well there. So these are the kinds of ways in which the G20 could push the solar agenda.
ISA has taken a massive task of bringing solar power to the global south, largely focused on Africa, Latin America and Asia. What has been the progress so far?
The biggest progress has been the ability of the Solar Alliance to get countries to adopt solar energy in various forms and see the benefits that accrue with it, and therefore to change or introduce regulations which help the flow of money so that large-scale solar development can occur. For Africa, we have launched a partial risk guarantee fund which provides a payment guarantee so that if the investor is not repaid in time, then we provide it as an interest-free loan which is then returned once the money is there. What this does is it greatly enhances the interest of investors to invest in countries where otherwise investments in solar were not happening.
Amid liquidity concerns post-COVID and Ukraine war, how hopeful are you of meeting the financial requirements?
Actually not if you're looking at it globally. So last year, for example, there were $250 billion that were invested in solar. This year it's about $350 billion, more than has ever been spent in the electricity production sector, even at the peak of the fossil fuel boom. But most of this money is going to the OECD countries and China. The challenge is, how do we get this money to the other parts of the world, particularly the developing parts of the world, which are seen as being risky for investors to invest in.
ISA has expanded since its inception. Which are the new countries which may become members of the alliance?
We have already had 116 countries which have signed the framework agreement. That's as of today. And we get approximately one new member a month. So we have also changed the rules. Earlier the rule said only countries between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn could become members. Now it has been changed that all the countries which are members of the UN can become members. So that is 193 countries. Our goal is that all those 193 countries become members of the ISA as well.
There is an ambitious plan to connect national grids under the One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative. What is the status of this initiative?
First of all, the ISA has asked EDF, Electricity de France, to look at the potential for linking different regional grids. So, for example, the East Asia grid with the South Asia grid, the Indian grid with the Gulf grid, and so on. And figure out where is it that both the amount of energy transferred can be high and at the same time we are able to recover the costs. While this is going on, there have been discussions between Australia and Singapore, between India and UAE, between Saudi Arabia and Egypt on setting up these kinds of interconnections. Our goal is to enable the countries where the sun has already set to receive electricity, solar electricity, from countries where the sun is still shining. And therefore connection of these regional grids will enable solar electricity to flow and therefore countries to minimize the amount of money that they invest in batteries.
ISA is also looking at helping set up mini grids in African countries. How do you utilize the experience of India in terms of mini grids when you implement projects in Africa?
If you look at the Indian experience, we went through several stages. But the model that has worked is that the regulator, for example in UP, Bihar, etc., have established solar mini-grid policies. Under those policies, private sector invests. They charge a tariff from the people, what the people can bear on the one hand, and which cover their costs on the other hand. And through this, we have seen approximately 400 solar mini-grids which are operational right now and dependent on payments from consumers. Now, if the consumers don't get electricity, they won't pay. So that's why it's important for them to continue working. It is this experience that, number one, private sector will and can come in. Number two, that regulations enable them to be comfortable in coming in. And number three, you need a range of consumers, consumers at home, consumers in businesses, consumers in anchor loads like cell phone towers. You need a range of consumers for the solar mini-grid operator to be able to meet his or her own costs. Through these kinds of changes, we are trying to spread mini-grids across the world.
What role G20 under India's presidency can play in speeding up energy transition to meet climate goals?
Most important, India has brought sustainability onto the G20 agenda. If you recall, the G20 was started out as G7 in the financial crisis of the late 1990s. It was expanded to include more countries, particularly leading developing countries. It became a leaders summit somewhere, I think, around 2008 or 2009 or something of that sort. Now, in all of this time, the main effort of the alliance has been how do we enhance economic growth. The Indian emphasis on sustainable growth has been a sea change, because you are not looking at growth by any sort, you are looking at growth by sustainable means. This is important because if we are to live in the world together, then solidarity asks that we do those kinds of things due to which we can all live together.
It was indeed a pleasure to have you, Dr. Mathur, on Akashvani. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
You were listening to an exclusive interview with Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance on G20 Agenda on Energy Security and Collective Action. The interviewer was Nirbhay Singh, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on Air Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.